Perfect, thanks. Oh, it already says that. Okay, so I'm Corey Fox. I'll do my best here. I've been keeping bees for, this is my third year now. Actually, my father and I do it on an average scale, I suppose, on our small farm. We have 30 hives on our farm. Actually, we have 28 hives on our farm, and then 2 on another farm, which is a wildflower farm. Ours is sort of a small-scale regenerative farm. So that's just me and about us. So I thought that although it's fairly rudimentary, I thought I would start with what is honey. So I'll actually just read the definition of what honey is. It says honey is a sweet and viscous substance made by several bees, the best known of which are the honeybees. Honey is made and stored to nourish bee colonies. Bees produce honey by gathering, then refining the sugary secretions of plants, primarily floral nectar, or the secretions of other insects like the honeydew of aphids. This refinement takes place within individual bees through regurgitation and enzymatic activity, and during storage in the hive through water evaporation that concentrates honey's sugar until it is thick and viscous, what we all know as honey. Most of it, just put it in our tea and don't really question what it is, but there's that for you anyways. I added also a couple of benefits of using raw honey. So our honey is raw. It goes through a pasteurization process sometimes when you buy it in the store, which is that it's heated, which sort of kills bacterias and stuff like that in it, claiming to make it safer for consumption. We, however, like to keep all of those things in there because everybody that we're involved with at least likes the honey raw because it's got all kinds of good stuff in there. Things like the pollen, people sometimes consume it to help with seasonal allergies and stuff like that. It helps with those kinds of things, as well as has a whole bunch of other properties like being loaded with antioxidants. Nutrition, it has a wide range of vitamins and minerals. It actually has almost enough vitamins and minerals to sustain life off of. So you could actually live off of honey, potentially if you wanted to. It might become a little too sweet for some of us after a while, but it also has lots of antibacterial properties. It's used to cleanse wounds, and it helps kill harmful bacteria in the gut. So when you consume raw honey, it's actually really good for gut health. It's very good at also relieving coughs. We use this with our kids all the time as like a natural cough remedy. It says that it's as effective or more effective than over-the-counter medicines, but is safe and effective for children over the age of 1. So a lot of time the recommendations is not to give kids under 1 honey because of certain concerns. There hasn't been any definitive studies to prove one way or the other whether or not that's the case, but we decide not to anyways, just in case. And there's lots of anti-inflammatory properties when you consume raw honey. So those are some of the benefits of using raw honey. How it's made. Honey is made sort of the same description before. Honey is made from nectar that's collected from flowers. The bees then regurgitate it into cells that are made from beeswax, which is secreted by bees by 8 different glands on their abdomen. So they actually produce the wax that they then build the combs from. The bees then fan their wings to evaporate the liquid out of it. So honey is, like nectar is something like 70%. The slides are right here, but honey is about 17% water, whereas the nectar is about 70% water. So they really reduce it down by fanning their wings over top of all of the open cells, oddly enough, before they then cap them. The capping just preserves it after that. So a couple of just cool bee facts, I thought, for everybody to know, which are pretty interesting. A colony in spring can have 10 to 15,000 bees, and in the summertime can have 50 to 80,000 bees just in one colony. So on our farm, at any point in time in the middle of summer, we might have a couple million bees flying around. So when you go to our bee yard, which is just tucked off into our forest off of one of our fields, you can stand there at the entrance and just watch these things zip back and forth, and it is actually quite loud when you stand in amongst them. So it's pretty cool. They can fly up to 24 kilometers per hour, and their wings beat 200 times a minute. So they're pretty fast little things also. The colonies usually contain only one queen who can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day. So in the wintertime, the bee population drops down drastically, and in the summertime, it ramps way back up, and you can tell how, because she can lay loads of eggs in there. A worker bee may gather 0.8 grams of honey in her working life, which is about 6 weeks. Each worker bee only lives for about 6 weeks and does a whole lot of work, which doesn't seem like a lot when you say it's only 0.8 grams of honey, but it's actually quite a bit of work. There are huge variances in the taste and color of different kinds of honey. So ours looks like this. This is actually a little bit more opaque than it usually is when we first harvest it. It's a little bit more clear than that. Over time, unprocessed honey, raw honey, will crystallize. It's one of those things that it's just a process that happens. It kind of goes to show that it's a pretty pure, unadulterated product. When you go through, the process of pasteurization, it often will stay liquid for much longer. It still will all eventually crystallize at some point in time. It doesn't mean that it's bad in any way. Honey can actually last pretty much indefinitely. It's one of the food products that you can store for years and years and years, and it never actually goes bad. The only thing that you really have to do is you can put your jar in like a bowl of warm water, and it'll turn it liquid again. However, some people like to just use it crystallize as it. When you put it in your tea, it goes liquid anyways. So as far as beekeeping goes, I wrote a bunch of stuff that I guess is as basic as I think we can get. So beekeeping basics, there's like weekly maintenance that you have to do. When I go out, there are certain things that you have to do. You open up the hive, you have to look for certain things. What you want to look for is the health of the hive, that you don't have any pest problems, and that you have a healthy population. So if you open one up and, I do have a slide somewhere in here that I'll show you, but you look for mites are one of the big ones that you are looking for, and hive beetles are another one that you're looking for, as well as just general health of things. A lot of the times when you're maintaining something, it likes to indicate to you that there's a problem. So if you open up a hive and there's a very small population of bees, you probably know that there's something bothering it. Or if there's any just strong signs of ill health. Once you work with them for a little bit, you tend to get to know them a little bit, like anything else. You can tell pretty quickly a lot of the time if there's anything wrong with them. The other thing that you want to look for, and this is my first slide here, is for eggs, larvae, and capped brood. So what you're looking for, and I had this picture because, and I'll show you really quickly here. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just to help you. These are the frames that we use in our honey supers. They do have this plastic thing in the middle that has like a comb shape on it. You don't have to have these things in them. They're just the ones that we choose to use. You can use open frames and they will build their own comb. This just has like a little bit of a starter, makes some of the processes easier. But this is sort of like a whitish yellow in here, and as you can see in the picture, they have black ones at the bottom. In our brood frames, which is generally this bottom box, and it's actually, all of our brood boxes are a little bit taller. This is a honey one, but all of my brood boxes are in use right now, so I didn't have one of those to bring. But we have frames that have black starters in them there, and that's what that looks like. The reason for using it is because those eggs, like, they're super tiny, smaller than like a grain of rice. So they're difficult to find on the lighter ones. When we use the black ones, they're much easier to see. So it just makes it easier for us. So you can see the eggs, the larvae as they start to get bigger. And I don't have a slide that shows the capped brood, but they cap it and it looks sort of chalky and a little bit orangey on top. And then eventually, the bee fully develops and then it actually chews its way out of there, so it breaks open the cap and then she flies out and starts doing her job. The other thing that you want to do, you don't always have to find your queen when you're checking for the health of your hive. It's good to find her if you can, but it's not always necessary. If you find eggs, larvae, and capped brood, you know that she's in there and doing her job, so you don't always have to find her. But one of the fun things to do is to try and find her, because sometimes it's very difficult. And so I thought I would do something really quickly and just see if anybody can, which is a game that we'll call Spot the Queen. So in this photo, you can see that it becomes pretty dizzying sometimes to try and find the queen. So if anybody can find the queen, I'll give you the opportunity to shout it out, and I'll give you a little pointer here, and you can tell me if you find her. So I'll give everybody a minute. If anybody wants to actually try and find her, I'll give you the pointer and you can try and point her out and we'll see if you get it right. So just raise your hand if you actually want to take your stab at pointing her out. After a while, looking at them, I have a competition sort of thing with my dad when we open them up, see who can find her the fastest. But I can't always spot her, no. Sometimes it is very difficult. And in the middle of summer, there's loads of bees. Sometimes, like I said, there's, up to 80,000 in a hive. And so usually what I do is I look at a frame, and after 30 to 40 seconds, if I can't find her, I stop looking. Because otherwise, you'll drive yourself nuts, and it becomes very dizzying after a while. As you can tell, they just kind of blend together. And imagine when they're moving. They don't ever stop moving like this. So this is the easiest time that you'll ever have to try and find them. If nobody wants to take a stab at it, yeah, you want to try it? Okay. So you've got your pointer there, you know how to use it. Let's see. Bingo, you found her. Great job. Okay, so the next slide, there you go. I actually show her. That's her right there. The queens are a little bit longer than the rest of the bees. They actually, one of the easiest indicators I find to find them is they have bigger legs. So her legs are a little bit longer than the rest. They can be very similar in color, but they also can be very different in color. Sometimes they're really light looking, sometimes they're really amber looking, and their stripes are actually a little bit less defined than the rest of the workers. So just thought I'd challenge everybody on your eyesight here. So
She's
the
got a black on her. She's got a bigger black head part, abdomen.
yeah.
Yep. You can't see as much as the of her black and white yellow body. Her wings are bigger.
Yeah, her head is actually kind of underneath that bee that's right in front of her there. And that is her abdomen, and then the rest of her there. So yeah, yeah, good job. That's fantastic. Most people aren't able to do that, so good eye. Again, one of the other things that I said is pest treatment. That's one of the other things that you want to look for when you open up a hive. So we do currently what most commercial beekeepers do, which is like 2 pest treatments per year. Now, I'll preface this with we are trying to figure out a more natural way to treat these pests, because the current best practice is using things like formic acid, and you use it to kill off any mites and stuff like that. It's a very typical treatment in the beekeeping world. You typically do 2 treatments, one in late spring to summer, and then late summer to fall. One of the things that you're really trying to ward off is, and I'm not sure if this is how you say it, but the varroa mites. They seem to be the biggest problem plaguing bees as far as pest problems go. The other ones are hive beetles that you look for, but you don't really have to treat for them. You just go in and you actually pick them out and kill them. They don't really cause too much harm to the bees, but they will consume the honey, which is the bees' resources and our harvest products, you know, if that's what you're keeping the bees for. I do have a slide showing the mites, but I actually put it at the end of everything, so we'll circle back to that. So I'll go through the different roles that bees have as far as the different kinds of bees. There's 3 different kinds of bees usually that you find. The first one is the queen. So I do have another slide here. That's a close-up of the queen. You can tell that she's got bigger legs to her and a much longer body. The role that the queen has is to produce eggs, give off pheromones that influence the behavior and communicate with the rest of the colony. She helps help new colonies through swarming. So in the springtime, we get to swarm season, and what hives do is they swarm. They kind of leave. A lot of the time, it's because they're naturally looking for, another place, or they're naturally splitting. So a new queen cell might happen, and you'll get 2 queens, and they don't like that in there. So the hive will naturally split, which is what we try and encourage anyways for various reasons, and I'll explain that to you in a little bit. The queen can live up to 5 years and will leave the hive only once generally for her mating flight. She will go up, she'll fly out of the hive and she'll go up really high, and she can mate with up to 20 drones, which are male bees, during her mating flight. And she will gather enough sperm to fertilize all of the eggs that she will ever lay in her lifetime. So she only does it once, and that's it. And then she has a job to do for the rest of her life, which is generally about 5 years. The worker bees, which are all of the females, this is a typical worker bee. All of the workers are all females. They do all of the work in the hives. And their jobs are building comb, feeding the larva and the pupa, guarding against intruders, cleaning out dead bees and other debris from the cells inside the hive, collecting nectar and pollen to make honey for themselves as well as other members of their colony, foraging for pollen and nectar, tending to the queen and the drones, ventilating the hive, defending the nest, and performing other tasks to preserve the survival of the colony. One of the most interesting points that I found in here is when bees die or there's anything in their hive, you can watch them. They bring it to the entrance of the hive and they just literally shove it out. They clean constantly, which is just really interesting to see. The next ones are the drones, are the males. And they've got a little bit fatter bodies to them, and they've also got like the big googly eyes to them. That's the biggest difference I find with them. You can spot them really easy when you open up your hives. They got the big googly eyes looking at you. So the role of the drones, interesting point, they're actually born from unfertilized eggs is how drones are born. Don't ask me exactly how that works. I don't know all of the inner workings. God created these things pretty fantastical. So that's how drones are born. And pretty much their only job is to mate with the queen. They have no other roles in the hives. So the male bees have it pretty easy, I think. They really don't do a whole lot. They still play an important role. Obviously, we need them. But they otherwise don't do a whole lot. So that's it as far as, the types of bees, what they do. So practically, I thought I would go into some of the pieces of equipment that you need in order to maintain bees. That's sort of theoretical. Now we'll get into a little bit of practical stuff. So I have another photo here. This is what our bee yard sort of looks like. We've got pallets that we have 4 hives on each pallet. All of the openings, face to 2 sides of the pallets, which actually face the rest of them. If you can kind of tell here, right there, that's the opening of one of them. And it faces the other opening of this one over here, because we built like a little corridor here that you can walk through. You can sit down beside them, open them up, and work on them. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and we have to do quite a number of them, so it becomes, a little taxing. So I bring a little milk crate with me. I sit down, open them up, do any work that I have to do, close them up. What you don't want to do is you don't want to sit in front of the hives, because they still are coming and going as you work on them, so it agitates them a little bit, which you don't want to do, because then they sting you. So as far as hive construction goes, I sort of made this up so that you can, get the general idea of what they look like. And there are 2 components here that I'm actually missing because I don't have extras of them. And like I said, the rest of my stuff is in use. So I'll just kind of step back here and explain these to you. This is just like the top of it. Sometimes they don't have like the little metal covering on it. We like these ones because it helps shed any of the rainwater or anything like that. It helps preserve them for a little bit longer. This is literally just to keep it closed and keep rainwater off. It's a little bit bigger than the rest of it. So it sort of sheds water. When you put this on, I kind of like to push it to the front so it kind of covers their opening so that you're not getting water dropping there. Because water, like today, bees aren't flying because if it rains, they don't fly. Because if they get hit with a drop of water, that's it for them. It kills them pretty easily. And even overwintering, water is actually one of the hardest things on bees. So generally, you have the top, and then there's another piece of wood that goes on top of here, and it has a little hole in it. It's for ventilation purposes. So that goes on top of here, and it kind of tells the bees where to stop. Otherwise, any place that there is, they will build comb out in, they'll just kind of fill up all of these areas. So you don't want them building up into the lid here, because they use something called propolis, which is like glue, and it's very strong. So when we build our hives, we just kind of nail them together, and then the bees glue the rest together. They become actually really strong after a while. And when you go to open it up, you have to use your hive tool, which is this guy here, and you actually have to like crack each one of these open, because every time you open and close them, they will glue it right back shut afterwards. It's what keeps everything out of their hives. It's just something that they do. So the top of it is usually called a honey super, because the bottom one, like I said, is usually, it's the brood box. It's where they do all of their egg laying. They build it out mostly in brood, and then they have a little bit of honey in there also, just to have resources to help feed the queen and maintain other things. So this top one is usually filled with frames like this, which are what we use for when they're just making honey. We use the small, you can use bigger ones, but we use the smaller ones because when this thing is full of honey, it actually becomes really heavy. So to take off the bigger ones, just is too much work, so we use smaller ones. So you have your top one, which is generally for honey production, and the bottom one is brood. So there's also another component that usually goes in between the brood box and the honey super, which is called a queen excluder. So it's this wire rack that sits on top of here, and then they do the same thing. They glue it all right together. But it has like slots in this wire rack that don't allow the queen to get up into the honey producing boxes, because otherwise she will start to lay eggs in there, and then it becomes a brood box, and then it's hard to separate all of that stuff. So you want all of the brood to be happening in the lower one. So they made these cool things called queen excluders, and the slots in them are big enough for the worker bees to travel back and forth in between, but small enough that the queen can't get through it. So it's a pretty cool piece of equipment that somebody designed at some point in time who's a lot smarter than I am. And then you have just the bottom, which you can get ones that are solid, or you can get ones that actually have like a mesh bottom here. So it allows, if any water does get in, it allows it to drain out. We generally don't find it to be a problem if you have a good enough lid on it, and we actually take like a little shim and we shim up the back of our hives just in case any water gets in, that it will run out. They are not sloped as they are. If I designed them, I probably would have done that, but that's the way that they are. So that's the general construction of the hives that we use. There are different styles of beekeeping. There are ones that are used in Europe a lot, and they're much longer. They don't at all look like this, but this is just the way that I'm familiar with, the way that I learned, and the way that we do it. So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. And if you decide to start keeping bees, that's totally up to you. You can do it however you would like. So that's generally the construction of the hives. The next thing that I suppose I'll look at is, so this is one of the other frames. The other frames have a slot in here. It's kind of like a starter strip for them, and they just build off of that. This is just an open frame. Sometimes they have like a wire that runs in here that they build off of, or they're just like this. My dad and I did a cutout one time. There was a neighbor's shed who had a whole lot of bees in the side wall of it. And when you do a cutout, you want to try and take the queen with you, so you You want to try and find her and see if you can take the queen with you. You cut out comb and you sit it in here, and then you just take an elastic and you wrap it around to hold it in. And then you just plop it into one of your boxes. And if you take the queen with you, the rest of the bees will come with you because she's communicating with them, telling them all what to do. They can sense her, so they'll all come with you. A lot of people will use these. Sometimes we use them for when you go to harvest, you can actually just cut the comb right out of here. And instead of harvesting honey, like we do and putting it into jars, you can harvest the comb with the honey. Because there are actually, believe it or not, benefits to consuming honeycomb as well, because it contains a lot of the pollen that they collect. And I didn't add points, but there are a whole number of benefits to actually consuming bits of raw honeycomb as well. So some people like to eat it like that. It's not mostly what we do this way. There are some people that like it, so we do a little bit of it, but it's mostly like a couple of our neighbors that really like it, so I've started doing it for them. But it's pretty cool, actually. You can just take a little bite, becomes like a kind of like a little piece of gum in your mouth. It's very chewy. You can swallow with no problems whatsoever. But that's another way that you can do things. A couple of the other tools are, this is one that we picked up, that when we're doing maintenance, you can actually take this guy and just slip it right on the side there. And as you're working, you can take a frame out and sit it in here, and it just rests right in here, so that you don't have to try and hang on to and balance everything. We first started and we would just take these out and lean them against the side like this. This is a little bit neater way of doing it, and a little bit more organized sometimes. Like with anything else, the more you do it, you just try and make processes more efficient so that you're not spending as much time on everything that you have to do. At first, maintenance would take us, a couple of hours for just a couple of hives. Now with 30 hives, it takes us just a couple of hours to go through all of the hives and do all the things that we need to on a weekly basis. The next tool that you absolutely need to have is a hive tool. It looks like this, kind of like a little bit of a paint scraper with a hook on the end. And it's got this flat spot because what happens, let me move all this stuff. As things are all glued together, you first need to pry and crack them open. Like I said, sometimes it's actually really difficult to do. It takes some strength sometimes. This hook here with a little spot on the end is actually designed so that you can just hook it in underneath here, and then it presses up against the side and you can lift a frame out, because these all get stuck in there as well. They glue everything down. Literally everything gets glued together. And there's all kind of like comb that's built out on these, almost like right out to the sides here usually. And you want to pry them out, and then generally try and hold them from the sides here, because there is going to be loads of bees all over them. So you want to try and kill as least as possible when you do your maintenance. It's inevitable that you're going to harm some of them. It's not such a huge deal, like I said, because they can lay so many eggs in a day that they will reproduce really quickly, but we still try and be as gentle as we can anyways. So that's your hive tool. This is a bee brush. So when you take a frame, if you're trying to do something, say you're harvesting or you're trying to inspect the cells for anything, you can just like gently brush them off like this. I tend not to use this because I find that anytime you touch bees, they get angry. So they don't really like to be touched so much. What we actually do, and I didn't bring it with me, is we use a leaf blower, a gas-powered leaf blower, and we actually just blow them right off the frames. And you would think that it would make them more angry because you're just kind of blasting them off, but they don't. They actually respond much better, I find. And so that's the way that we use it. I don't know whether or not it's because it's just like a strong wind or something like that, as opposed to a physical touch, but that's the way that we've found that we like to do it better. There's no one way or the other that's better. Some people will just take them, and this actually happens pretty commonly with us too, is you just kind of give it a shake over top of your hive, and a lot of them will just fall off. Some of them hang on really tight, but that's the way to kind of move them around. They're pretty resilient. You can shake them off like that and it doesn't harm them or anything like that. They really don't get angry when you do that either, so it's another easy way to do things. Another one of the important tools that, again, sometimes I tend not to use as much as other people do, which is a smoker. You can open it up here and put whatever sort of fuel that you're going to use for your smoker. There's all kinds of different things that people use. Some people use wood chips. I tend to, if I'm going to use it, use like grass clippings, dried grass clippings. I find to smoke the best actually. So I'll start a little fire in the bottom. You don't want anything actually really flaming. You want it smoldering and smoking. Because if there are any flames and you start squeezing this, it blows it right out here. And if you have any embers or it's too hot, you will burn the bees, and they don't like that either. So there's all kinds of different things that you can use. Sometimes people find them really finicky. I find that grass clippings are the easiest for me as far as getting good smoke going. What you do usually when you're going to go and open one up is you'll come and you'll smoke the front of the hive here. And then when you open it up, you can smoke the top and stuff like that. People think that the smoke makes the bees kind of like drowsy and docile. It actually doesn't really do that. They just kind of don't like it and they fly away. So you have less bees to work with at the time. So if you do smoke a hive and then you open it up, you're going to find that there's a little bit less bees in it and it might be a little bit easier to work in. So the other one is the one that, this is what I use most. So this is my bee suit. I'm not going to put it on to show you, but it's got mesh here with like a thicker mesh in between, finer mesh on either side, and it's just thick enough so that they can't sting you through it. And as well, it keeps them off your face. You can get full body suits, which I'm actually going to be getting for this year, only for harvest times. The rest of the time I don't find, all bees are a little bit different. Each actually colony acts a little bit different. They're very individual that way. So I generally just put on this piece of the suit, and that's fine just to keep them off my face. A lot of people will wear gloves. I tend to not wear gloves. I can feel things better without gloves, and as long as you get to know them and know how to work with them, it's generally not too bad. They don't get angry with you and try and sting you when you just do regular maintenance, unless you're causing a ruckus in there. Then they kind of get a little bit upset. But at harvest time, you're going in and kind of taking their resources for the winter time, and they get a little bit more angry at that time. So I tend to cover up a little bit more. Through harvest, we harvested 350 kilograms last year at the end of the season, and I only got stung 6 times out of 30 hives, so it wasn't too bad. Most of the time, I'll just wear jeans and a t-shirt and then work on them. I tend to always have like my muck boots on when I'm around the farm, so boots are a good idea also. But like I said, I am getting a full suit so that, because you can do a couple of harvests sometimes, depending on how they produce in the year. Every year is a little bit different for bees. So sometimes you get one year that's really good and they produce really, really well. Sometimes you get a season where they don't produce all that well. So you might get 1 or 2 harvests out of a whole year of keeping them. And so if you do get a harvest that's more in the middle of the year, and you're trying to do that kind of work, and it's nice to be able to wear shorts when it's really warm out. So I'm getting a full suit so that I can wear shorts and work on them. Aside from that, that's like there are a couple other tools here and there that you can get. I find that this is pretty much all I use on a regular basis anyways. So the tools are fairly basic. They're really not that difficult to work on once you start to get to know what you're looking for and those kinds of things. So generally I find beekeeping to be one of those pretty relaxing things, you know. Unlike another animal that might get out of the fence, you know, they're already out and you don't really have to try and chase anything down and keep them in. It's pretty low stress for the most part, and there's actually some things to say. There's statistics that show that beekeepers actually live longer than some other people because it's kind of just a relaxing thing to do, is go in and work on them. Something about the, you know, just working with them and being relaxed like that, I guess it de-stresses people. So it's a fun thing, and I like doing it anyway. So the next part of all of that is harvesting, I think, is the next thing that we'll touch on. I do have another slide for harvesting. This is my dad. And that's what's going on there. So that's actually what our hives look like typically nearing the end of the year. There is a medium-sized box on there just because we didn't have anything else, and then you see the smaller super on top. What they're doing there is called bearding. They clump up all at the entrance of the hive. A lot of the time when something's going on with them, they'll do that. So if you were doing maintenance, if you opened it up or anything like that, and a whole bunch of bees flew out while you were doing that, they come back and they do this thing called bearding. Sometimes it's when they're angry, but sometimes it just happens when you're doing regular maintenance on them. Nothing to be any concerned over. But that's what that's called. So harvesting, there's a couple different methods of harvesting. I already touched on, you know, actually harvesting comb. That's called combed honey. What we generally do is just the honey itself. So we typically use just these kind of frames. And what we do, I couldn't find, I have some other stuff in storage, so I couldn't find a couple of the tools. There's something called a hot knife that actually you plug in, and it heats up. And when these are filled with comb, they typically build it right out to the sides of the wood here. So you take this hot knife and you just press it right up against the wood, and then you kind of saw it back and forth and go along, and it uncaps all of the cells. And so then what we do is we put it into a centrifuge that has all kinds of slots for frames. We rented one this year. We're going to be looking into buying one because we have something that's, you know, growing on our farm is beekeeping. So we're looking into buying one, but you can get all different kinds of them. You put it in, whether or not it's like a hand crank one. You can get hand crank ones that you don't need any hydro for. Or you can get much larger ones. The one that we used last year, you can put 20 frames in all at once, and you plug it in, and it just spins it. So you can watch it just throws all the honey out onto the sides of this, and then it runs down to a collection. You have a spigot, and then you pour it into food-grade pails. And then you have to run it through screens to clean out any wax. You will always get some wax and stuff like that in it. But when it's jarred, it should be generally pretty clear of that stuff. So that's the way that we like to do it. There's other tools. It looks like a little, hair pick almost that you can uncap them with also. There's a couple of different methods of it. One that looks almost like a cheese grater. There's all kinds of tools that you can get and all different kinds of methods for harvesting that all different kinds of people use. It's just kind of whatever works well best for you in your situation. A lot of the time people who have just a couple of hives will just get one of the hand crank ones, and they don't need something that has hydro. But we have a little bit more than that, so we opt for things that are a little bit less taxing on us when we go to do it. I forgot to include one picture. I have a photo of my dad when we did harvesting. So what we do a lot of the time is we'll just take these, our honey supers, and we flip them up on the side like this. These might fall out, but when they're full, they don't. And then you just come from the front, and like I said, we use a leaf blower, so we just go to the front of it, and we just start blasting them off. And they blow all right out the back side of it here. And we do it typically over top. We set up a table like this next to the hives that we're working on, and we blow all the bees towards their hive so that they kind of go back in there. And then we just take this whole thing right out and put it into a bin. And we take the whole box with us. It seems to be a lot easier than a lot of people will still take out each individual frame and try and clean them all off and put them in another container. Again, it's just what works best for you. You can get more bees off when you take it all individually by frame, but when you're trying to be efficient with your time, sometimes a couple of bees come with you, so we don't always get all of them off during harvest, but seems to be the easiest way for us to do it and most efficient, we've found. So that's as far as harvest goes. Again, there's all kinds of different things that you can do. It just, when you get into stuff like this, so my father took a beginner's beekeeping class. And if anybody wants, a recommendation on where you can do that, if you want a little bit more information than I'm giving you, I can recommend somebody. They are super great. They're who we got all of our supplies from and got going with, so they can help you with that any further. But I just dove into it without any prior training. I just kind of learned on the go, asked my dad questions, asked our friend questions, and so really, it's like just getting into it. You don't necessarily have to take a class, but sometimes it's a little bit easier. I tend to learn better on the job. I'm a tradesman. That's just kind of how I learn. So there's a couple of things at the end of all of this. I think that's my last slide anyhow. Oh no, there you go. So that's actually those Vero mites that you can look at. I don't have a picture of any of the other ones, but these are those Varroa mites that you're kind of looking for. They attach themselves to the bees and they damage the bees. So what happens is it's not like they're destroying anything else in the hive, they're actually destroying the bees themselves so that they can't do the work. So that's what you're looking for on them. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to see than that. That's really zoomed in, so you kind of have to really look for them when you're looking at them. But a couple of the other things to consider. One of the stats that I just found for this past season. So if you are going to start beekeeping, there are a few things that I would say that you want to consider first. It says, on Saturday, the Canadian Association of Professional Apiculturists reported that as many as 46% of Ontario honeybee colonies did not survive this winter. So that's one of the biggest challenges to beekeeping is overwintering them. It's by far the hardest fight that anybody has with keeping bees is keeping them over winter. We've only been through one winter with as many hives as we have, so I'm hoping and praying and crossing my fingers that when I go out and check on them, because I haven't had time to recently as things got busy, to go and check on them, finding how many of ours did survive the winter. So it's not a guarantee. Everybody's a little bit different, but that's an average. And an average for a winter is anywhere up to 50% of bees die over the winter. There isn't any real specific reason that anybody can tell why. Some people have speculations on this or that, and I don't like to place, too much weight on any of that. Somebody that I talked to recently said that he has most success when he shims the back of the hives, which is why I did that. Because in wintertime, what happens is they actually lay specific wintertime bees, and pretty much all they do all winter is they clump up around the queen and kind of buzz around her just to keep her warm. And that's pretty much what they do all winter long. However, when we have drastically fluctuating temperatures like we do here in Ontario. Sometimes, it's 15 degrees in the middle of February. Sometimes, it's negative 15. They clump up and they create a good bit of heat around them. So when you have a cold box and a warm center, you get condensation. And like I said, water is one of the hardest things on bees. It'll kill them real quickly. So my thought was that if you shim the back of the hives and you allow it to look like this rather than just flat, if any condensation does form, then it'll run to the front and then down and out, hopefully not dripping on them, because that is what commonly happens, is that condensation will drip down and it'll hit the bees and it'll kill them. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is pest problems. If you don't do treatments, pests can take hold and they can wipe out colonies pretty quickly. Another one is some people suspect that it's agricultural chemicals that are being used that are harming the bees and they're not surviving, but nobody really has any definitive answers on that. So it's pretty hard to tell. It's just something that beekeepers deal with, which is one of the reasons why I said that in the springtime, bees naturally will want to swarm and split their hives. So every year what we've done is we go in and we split hives. So if we find that one had died over the winter, we find another strong one, and we take all of the elements that you need to start a hive, like eggs, larvae, and capped brood, and some honey frames, and we'll put that all into a new box or just one of the other ones that we've cleaned out. And sometimes you'll find a new queen cell that's built onto there. I don't have a slide of it, but the queen cells, they look like little peanuts. They stick off of the frames a lot more. They're pretty easy to pick out when you're going through stuff. So sometimes you can get a new queen cell and leave your old queen in the hive that you're splitting off of. And that's called capturing a virgin queen. So you bring along just a new one that they were going to create. And you can do it that way, or you can split them and then you can actually purchase queens from suppliers who do things like just breed queens for this purpose, because it is a challenge for beekeepers. Wintertime is definitely like the hardest thing on them. One of the other things to consider is allergies. I'm not allergic to bees, but if somebody is, you might not want to keep them because you will get stung. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. When you keep them, you will eventually get stung. We keep an EpiPen on hand. Even though nobody that works on them is allergic, we just keep it on hand just in case. It's just one of those precautionary safety measures that I think are wise to do. And the other things are food and water sources. Now, most people live in areas where they will have food and water sources. Bees can fly up to like 2 miles or something like that. So if you don't have a lot of flowers right around your hive, it's not a problem. They will go and find stuff other places. That's not a big deal. We also have 4 different ponds on our property and a stream that runs through it, so we have ample water sources, but you also want to make sure that you have a water source around for them. So those are a couple of like the parameters. And those are mostly the things to consider. Otherwise, it's like if it's something that you want to do, or you find enjoyable to do, that's pretty much, the only other considerations. So I think that's probably it as far as I have to say on as much as I could think of. I'm by no means an expert, but I will take any questions if you have them and do my best to answer them. So if that was filled up enough for everybody, then I'll pass it over to questions if anyone has any. Hopefully I answered enough stuff as I went.
Just quickly, can you talk a little bit about the costs involved?
Yeah, okay. So when you get started, a lot of the times what you have to do, you have to buy all of these pieces. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. There are people who will build their own, like actually mill all of the wood themselves and do that. That's not what we did. To buy a couple of frames, all of these and all of the equipment that you need is like a couple $100, to get you to there. And then a lot of the time what you have to do when you're starting, unless you for some reason found a colony somewhere and you're like, I want to start keeping bees, I'm going to try and cut them out, which I don't advise to do right away. You can capture a colony and it doesn't cost you anything, but otherwise there's lots of beekeepers who are providing what are called nukes. They're a beginning hive. They come with like 4 or 5 frames usually. And it's like what we do when we split. They come with all of the necessary things, and they usually plop a queen in there. And that is usually like $300 or $400 for a nuke. So, you're looking, probably under, you could probably do it a little bit more economically if you sourced maybe some used stuff and stuff like that. But you're, looking, I would say anywhere between like $500 and $800 to get going. Other than that, that's just to get going with, boxes and bees. All of the other equipment, from there, you can buy these for a couple $100. You can get like all these kinds of things vary really widely on prices that you can do, but your basic equipment's all pretty cheap. It's going to be, like $15-20 for something like this, and all of the other things. Jars and all that kind of stuff. You can rent equipment to harvest like we did last year. We don't actually own any of the centrifuges that we use. You can rent stuff, but to get going, if you want to start, I would say that's probably generally a range that you are going to be looking at to start keeping bees with one hive. From there, you can always split, right? You can split your hives if you want to, grow some more. Sky's the limit for that kind of stuff. If you want to just use the mic here so everybody can hear your question on YouTube.
Is that good?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just curious, who are you getting your supplies from? Like the frames, etc.
Yep, right now we buy all of our equipment. We have bought all of our stuff from BLB Honey in Dresden. Bria and Tyler are the people who own and run that. They're super great people, been super helpful along the time. I'm just going to give them a bunch of free advertising here on YouTube because they've been super great with us. So that's who we get all of our stuff from. Going forward, we're starting to build relationships with suppliers of stuff because we have a little bit more than generally they would supply. It's usually for, a couple of hives or something like that. Beginners, they supply a lot of stuff for. We're starting to build relationships with suppliers so that we can buy stuff wholesale. But they're really good starting point to if you want to look into them. Anything else?
You mentioned that sometimes you might do a first or a second harvest for a season. How would you make that decision if you wanted to make like an early harvest, and when would that be?
Okay, so you can generally make that decision. So what you want to look at is, in order to harvest, we'll take one frame, for example. In order to harvest one frame of honey, you want to make sure that at least 70% of the cells are capped. They're done producing, they've capped it all off. That's when it's like ready to go. If you get to closer to 100%, that's great. At the end of the year, you'll get closer to that if you just wait. But you want to look for 70% capped in order to harvest it. Because if you don't wait until that point in time, the uncapped cells have too much water in it, and it can spoil things with having too much water in it. So that's what you look for. And as far as timing goes, it's really variant from hive to hive. So last year, we installed a bunch of new hives, and some of them we didn't get to harvest any honey from. It took them the entire year just to build out their brood and start producing honey. And what we do is we leave honey for them for the wintertime. Some people will feed them. They'll strip all the honey, and then they'll feed them with like sugar water or fondant cakes. Some people do also. So you just have to observe them. You have to be checking on them weekly. If you have a hive that's, you know, just exploding and you have your brood, they're all done building all that out, you throw a honey super on top, and then, you know, in a month or two the whole thing's full, like you could take that off, you know, and then you could harvest at any point in time once you reach that like 70%. So what I would say though is that we're looking at one individual frame at 70%. You also kind of want to look at the whole box at 70% also. You can harvest individual frames if you're doing it on a small enough scale that makes sense for you. We're doing it on a little bit bigger scale, so we generally like to harvest a whole box at a time. But you just have to observe, you know, their activity, their health and strength and stuff like that, as well as just making sure that if you're going to leave their own resources for them for the winter, you want to make sure, generally what we say is like one whole like honey super for the winter for them. So you can start stacking, you can stack them as high as you want to. If you just want to wait, there were times that it got really busy in the year last year where we just kept on throwing on other supers, and we had like 3 or 4 of them stacked tall because there was one that was full. And if they don't have anything else to do, if their honey super's full, you risk them swarming and leaving because they don't have any more room to build stuff out, and that's all they want to do. They just want to work and work and work. So we just throw more stuff on top to give them more to do so that we don't lose them. And then by the end of the year, we have 3 supers that we can harvest. So it all depends on your bees and what your scale is and what your time is, you know, all of those kinds of things. Does that answer it well enough? Okay. Anything else?
I had a friend that she has bees as well, and she said that she would recommend waiting until you can afford to buy at least 2 hives,
Okay.
just because they act so different from each other.
They do.
Would that be something you recommend?
I mean, I know people who have single hives, and I don't necessarily see a problem in having a single hive. They do act differently. One of the reasons why, you know, I might see for having 2 of them is that you could lose one over the winter and then you have to restart. So if you have a couple of them and you lose one, then you can split that one that you kept over the winter and then have another 2. But otherwise, their behavior, I don't necessarily think would dictate why you would keep them. Yeah, all bees are different though, so I'm not sure exactly, you know, what her reasoning might be for
Well,
that.
I think she started with 1, and then I think she lost it, and then so the next time she got 2, and then she's like, they were completely different than what she had experienced the first time. So
Yeah.
she said she just recommended to me if I wanted to get into it, if you can't afford 2 off the bat, maybe just save up and wait.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably sound advice. I would say it's probably mostly because of losing them, I would think, because, you know, you make this investment and then they all die, you know, over a winter, and then so then you have to buy essentially a new nuke because you have to have a bee population to restart. At least you have all of your equipment and stuff like that to restart, but you would have to buy like another nuke in order to start. It's funny how different they can be, though. You know, we have 28 of them on our farm, and you open it up, and they are all very different. Each colony acts very differently. It's funny that way.